We need a war chest to fight the battle of the Talmud. All right. Why is it a battle? Why is it a battle? Because when you want to come to the truth, there has to be a battle of using your mind and being objective and being honest to try to find the truth of the teachings. It's a battle. And in that battle, you need a war chest, right? You need to use, obviously, our minds. We have to use our objectivity. In other words, we have no personal gain that we want on how to see something. We just want to know the truth of the teachings. Together with that, remember, we start with a Mishnah, and the Gemara is going to elucidate the Mishnah. One of the ways that it does is what's called a brisa. That might be a term you haven't heard before. You hear it's a braitot. It's on our screen over here. See it on the screen, right? So a braita, it comes from the word outside. It is greater than the Gemara in the sense that it predates the Gemara. It carries more weight, but doesn't have the same weight as a Mishnah because it's outside of the Mishnah. Why is it outside of the Mishnah? Because what do we explain about the Mishnah? It had to be very concise, right? Very concise. So therefore, there were things that when we're talking about the sages over 6 generations pouring over, right? And then Rabbi Yehuda Nasi on his generation, with all the sages in his generation coming together to put it together, they had to decide, what do you leave in and what do you leave out? What's leaving out called? A braita, right? It was left out, but it's still a teachings. It was left out because it's an elaboration, not an elaboration of the Gemara, but it's one of the tools that we use to understand the Mishnah. We use that which was left out to give us insight to what the Mishnah is teaching us. Is that clear?
So these were elements.
Go ahead.
These were elements of the sages who were debating what was.
Whoa! You said way too much there.
Okay.
You too much.
Okay.
Narrow it. These were teachings of the Tanoim,
Okay.
men of the Mishnah.
Yeah.
But it was left out of the Mishnah.
Okay.
It was left out of the Mishnah. But it's not as strong as the Mishnah. It's not as the Mishnah you're not going to argue on, right? The Gemara is not going to argue on the Mishnah because the Gemara is explaining the Mishnah.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
The Braita is in between. It carries more weight than the discussion of the Amoraim, right? Because it's a discussion led by the Tanoim, men of the Mishnah. But it doesn't carry the same weight as the Mishnah, because why? It is outside of the Mishnah. It's a Braita. That's what it means, outside. So this is it's an additional text to give us more clarity of what the Mishnah is teaching us, right? So in the teachings, when we say a Mishnah, we say Tanan, which means we taught. Who's we? Who's we?
The sages.
What sages?
Tanoim.
Tanoim, men of the Mishnah. Tanoim are men of the Mishnah. And why is it we? Because we're in Quebec. Oui, monsieur.
Well, they agree.
Listen, I was afraid that you were falling asleep and I wanted to make sure to wake you up. Why? Why we?
Because they agreed.
Because this is a collective whole of all of the sages, and therefore it's we. Therefore, not yeah. Don't say yeah.
But it makes it isn't it obvious?
No. Until I told you this, it wasn't obvious. So don't say that yeah. What do you mean yeah? Braita, though, one of the famous Braitas is the beginning of a book called Tanya. Tanya is a Braita. It's quoting a Braita. It means it was taught, not we taught, because it's not a collective. It's not a collective teachings that was thoroughly went through by all the sages, every nick and cranny, every word, every nuance that there is wasn't gone through like the Mishnah. So it wasn't we taught collective that it was so clearly agreed upon by everybody. It was taught. That's Tanya.
But isn't that by the Alter Rebbe?
The word Tanya means it was taught. It means it's a Braita. The beginning of Tanya is the word Tanya, which means it was taught in a Braita that before you come into this world, you take an oath, and before you come into this world, you take an oath that you should be righteous and not to be wicked. That's a teaching from a Braita. That's outside of the Mishnah. And then we quote after that. We if you remember in Tanya, what do? The Alter Rebbe quotes from. You don't know the beginning of Tanya. Boy, you have to come back to learn. Quotes from a Mishnah. That it's a contradiction to a Mishnah. And a Braita, can it contradict a Mishnah?
No.
Because it is outside of the Mishnah. So it can't contradict it. So in Tanya, he brings, but in the Mishnah, in Pirkei Avot, it says that you shouldn't consider yourself wicked, right? That's a Mishnah. It's a contradiction. Right away in the Tanya, he brings it, right? So that's the term Tanya. Less commonly known, right? It can be a biblical derivation, it can be alternate opinions, reasoning, context, and so on.